Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into the Cloud Native FM podcast, a show dedicated to help you track Kubernetes and its complicated landscape. So, what we are covering today, in a minute, I will invite Hector for this podcast to help us understand the key factor to consider when choosing a signing technology. You heard about the news OpenPubkey launched last month during the DockerCon, and we will be discussing in a detail what question you ask yourself before start using any technology, signing container signing technology. So, without any further delay, let me go straight to Hector. And thank you very much, Hector, for joining us on this exciting episode. So, first thing first, can you introduce yourself to our audience who currently listening to us?
Thanks, Sam. I'm Hector, Chainguard engineering. I also part of a maintainer team of Sigstore. And yeah, looking forward. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, wonderful. Hope we will definitely consider some audience question on the conversation today as well. And if you are listening or watching from anywhere in the world, use a YouTube chat section and add your question. As I've seen those questions and flowing, I will send it front of Hector to answer those as well. So before we further delay, let's start some questions, some consideration and what we actually try to cover here as well. So, number one thing I think in the Sigstore architecture is admittedly complex, but complexity is bad and should be avoided where possible. Unfortunately, in this case, the Sigstore community believe that complexity here is necessary. Unfortunately, it can be encapsulated in some very useful tool and program that hide this complexity to provide a great user experience. So that's a note from one of the article on the internet that Dan Loris, one of our friend who wrote about it. But let's start our first question. So, Hector, have you implemented a container image signing process in your development workflow? And can you tell my audience what is the current developer workflow are you using?
Sure. Yes. So the answer is certainly have adopted signing on my daily developing habits. Lately we are developing mostly Golang, so I am using Go Releaser, which integrates in this case with Sigstore uh, cosign, so I can sign all my images, container images, or any kind of binaries. I use keyless signing, which is something that also Sixto introduced to avoid managing traditional keys, which was kind of a pain in the past. And yeah, that kind of ephemeral keys alleviate some of the pains that as a developer had to experience in the past.
Yes, absolutely. And can you briefly touch upon of this idea that we actually oftenly heard in the community, a keyless signing? If anybody really new to the Sig Store way of signing images, can you
Mhm.
tell people like why would do we call it keyless, and and how actually currently right now we are signing our container images using Sig Store?
Yeah. So Sigstore supports multiple ways of signing. In this case, you can have the traditional key management services like Bolt or others. You can keep using your kind of traditional keys if you want, but it has introduced some way of kind of using the IDC providers or OpenID Connect to authenticate the user and get ephemeral keys that they call, or keys that they don't need to be reused or maintained for a long period. So you can just authenticate against the IDC provider. The IDC provider provides a token, right? And then we have a component here in Sigstore, which is called the certificate authority function, which use that token in order to create a contain certificate that's what you use for signing, and then for verification is what we later we will see is also checked. during the verification process.
Yes, absolutely. Now we can move our discussion to the next very important factor.
Mhm.
So, what factor influenced your choice these days of container signing technology?
Yeah, obviously a good question. So generally, I will say I pay attention to factors such as trust, security, transparency, and available tooling. Obviously, you need to check for technologies that they are mature enough in order to choose them to adopt them. It is quite important to know the community which is behind, especially which companies are involved, or which projects belongs to, and we know that today there are thousands of open source projects that they are released every day, but then after a few months they are no longer maintained. So you can see other approaches, other projects such as the scorecard, Salsa. They help you to evaluate this kind of statement to choose a project, to know if it's mature enough, it's secure enough, more or less, all these kind of things. So you, as a developer, can decide better than the past, right?
Yes, absolutely. Now we actually, right now, as we're discussing at this moment of time, now we have two different way of signing container images.
Mhm.
So recently, the Linux Foundation announced a new project called OpenPubkey for signing artifact. So can you give us a quick intro if you have taken a look at it?
Yeah. So I take a look at the OpenPubkey approach. I have been reading about it, the research paper, some of the articles about it, and check the implementation. I think it is great, first of all, for the community to have alternative solutions for signing process. And I'm pretty sure that OpenPubkey might solve some of the use cases that other solutions do not, right? So um, if I now think about how to simplify, or how signing works, both OpenPubkey and Sigstore use OpenID Connect, where the IDC providers are responsible to assert the identity of the users, right? In this case, OpenPubkey aims to simplify the signing by just reusing these kind of tokens that the IDC provider produce, has certificates. Mhm. Well, for instance, if you think about now Sigstore, they use this token in order to get a certificate, which is then what you use to sign any artifact, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, can we touch upon about the different? We heard about some difference during your conversation as well.
Yeah.
So, can you give us a how the SIG store works under the hood?
Mhm.
What architecture it
Yeah.
has, and how
Yeah.
it actually
Mhm.
open pub key is different from the SIG store architecture.
Yeah.
So, I believe
Okay.
I can share the screen, and you
Mhm.
can give walk us through as well.
So yeah, this is the main architecture of Sigstore. So as a developer, you kind of authenticates against your OpenID provider. Then you request, well, let's say this OpenID token is wired to full show, where then retain certificate that is published in a record. Record is a transparency log, mutable transparency log, where then all the certificate that you are using for sign can then be checked, right? Um, so this is, let's say, a simplified view that we have overall architecture. If I now think about OpenPubkey, so OpenPubkey talk to IDC provider, gets an ID token, and instead of getting all this certificate authority involved, which is basically the full certificate authority doesn't exist for the OpenPubkey approach, we use that token in a simplified way, to has a certificate itself. So we don't need to manage these certificates, etc. And then they sign any artifact with this token, right? They kind of embed the public key of their user, and then with another private key, they sign any artifact. So to simplify or summarize a bit, is they kind of they don't need this. third-party services, right? Although we will, I think I will share additional details that, for instance, some of these third-party services, they still need required when you need a production environment, right? So, but of course, the main difference here is that they don't require any certificate authority has function. So you can remove from the picture here, and then probably some of the other companies, they still necessary in the future for OpenPubkey.
Yes, absolutely. So I think like from your during your discussion, I can understand there's a two way to think about it. One way they actually there's architecture is similar, but it's reduced the main component that we have that's called certificate authority. And
Mhm.
does they actually also remove the record part as well? Because like the CA is also removed.
Yeah, so the initial proposal from OpenPubkey kind of aims to simplify everything, and then you just need the IDC provider, and that is the third-party service that you are depending on. The rest is totally gone, more or less based on the picture and their proposals. But if you then need to kind of think about other future concerns, that revocation, and other all verification of all signatures, then you need additional services, right? Like archival logs, transparency logs. So yes and no, right? So you still need the transparency log and some other services for signing, right?
Got it. I think like now the most important question at this moment of time is somebody is actually using Sigstore and they're trying to try to thinking about how the Sigstore comparison to the OpenPub key. So what do you take on? Like, does the usage of OID tokens from OpenPub key cause any privacy leaks?
So yeah, if we follow the initial approach, an attacker could use the ID tokens, right? So has a legitimate claim against an IDC provider. Nevertheless, I am aware that the OpenPubkey community has conducted some modifications into the initial approach in order to mitigate these kind of attacks. Unfortunately, there are other problems when using these ID tokens, such as, for instance, OIDC providers might change the claims. They are not expecting the user control claims fields, right? So let's say that the ID token, to those that they don't know, contains some claims with additional information. This metadata can include the email, can include gender, or any other data, which might be confidential for the people, right? And also lately, another detail is that these ID tokens are not being meant to be shared, only between parties. So here is another kind of risk, right? To kind of publish those that information when you are signing artifacts, right?
Yes, got it. And now I think we can circle back on communication here. So, are there any security concern to be aware of when adopting OpenPub key today?
Well, one thing that is important, I mentioned before, like trust. I think, well, so something that has been shared by the OpenPubkey creators is not production ready, right? So people might need to wait until how things are evolving. Also, I think there are a couple of considerations to take into account. OIDC providers are rotating their keys. These public keys of the OIDC providers are being used um, on the signing process for OpenPubkey, and they need to be stored in order to be able to check all signed artifacts, right? To verify all signed artifacts. So in their this proposal, they mentioned that this needs a service that constantly pull these public keys and store them somewhere so you can go and check all signed artifacts. But yeah, there are kind of contradict a bit the initial simplification of all the picture. Where if you compare it with Sigstore, well, we need another service that need to be storing and keeping an archival of these OIDC keys. As well, they have a hard-coded expiration of the ID tokens. What they name it PK tokens, but well, I try to simplify the explanation here. And revocation and verification of all signatures, yeah, it's uncertain how it's going to be done in the future, right? Um, in also the implementation that they have today, if we focus on the current GitHub project, they are storing the signatures, has the images in the image index, which is kind of contradicting again an OIDC specifications such as refers and OIC artifacts. The way that, for instance, Sigstore does it, kind of using all these specifications.
Yes, absolutely. So now I think that now the another question is like we spoke about different approaches and different philosophies of two container technologies. So basically, OpenPubkey, if I think people liked if they joined later in the conversation, is can you pinpoint again what is the
Mhm.
main difference if actually people are using this, looking at this diagram, and then they move and then you go back into the OpenPubkey docs, what are the different components this seems to see missing in OpenPubKey in front of the diagram we're actually right now reviewing?
Mhm. Yeah. So the main difference, in my opinion, is that OpenPubkey use the ID tokens instead of the signed certificates that provides full CA. In a production environment, if we think today like a production ready OpenPubkey approach, we will need to trust additional services to handle revocation and verification of all signatures, and also to try the vocation of IDC provider public key. So you will see at least another two, three services, which kind of bring back to transparency log. In this case, we have record for Sigstore, so we will need a transparency log for OpenPubkey. We will need an archival log. That's how they stated, but could be a different type of service. But in order to store all these IDC provider public keys and keep a historic of all of them, and yeah, you need uh, more or less, I would say, a more complex infrastructure to maintain than the one the Sigstore has. And also, well, they say that in the Sigstore community there are multiple companies such as Google, Red Hat, and other known companies that they are maintaining. Has a Chainguard as well, and yeah, so there is a very important community behind, and also public instance that you can use. So yeah, this is basically one of the main differences in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. And as you mentioned, like if you look at the right now, the adoption of the Six Store, as mentioned by Google, Red Hat, and bunch of very big companies are actually behind it, maintaining it, using it in the production. And last year, I think October 2022, they actually Six Store announced the GA. So this means more than 1 year, this Six Store is running as a GA. So that's being more stability, more production usage, and more use cases that community is actually driving effort towards as well. So that is one of the driving factor you can really take into consideration as well. And also, I think the most important question right now is how seamlessly does the container signing process integrate into your developers daily workflow? So that's basically a Six Store and OpenPub key.
Yeah. So nowadays I sign on my artifacts, and of course I use Sigstore Jigsin, right? Jigsin is this kind of a way to sign your commits. Um, so at Chainguard, we have implemented many CI checks, so you cannot get through without signing all your commits and etc. Obviously, this is something you would like to see on any open source project, right? So I think this is one of the things that I kind of adopted on my daily habits, like signing everything and verify the identities of the signing artifacts that I'm trying to use.
Yes, absolutely. And also, I think the more integration part, like let's say if people are working in a GitHub action or working in a Git repository, if there's a possibility, because right now we have two options. I know there are some tooling and some ways you can actually integrate Sigstore into your
Yeah.
CI/CD pipeline. Are you thinking the OpenPubkey is as easy to integrate in the CI/CD pipeline compared to the Sigstore?
Well, I mean, their implementation nowadays is using BuildKit from Docker. So they are also kind of some of the examples. They is also relying on GitHub Actions. So yeah, it is possible to use both approaches with GitHub Actions, at least from the current implementation, how things are working.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if a developer actually right now is listening to us, they have a one very important question in their mind. Have you observed any challenges or friction points for developers in adopting container signing practices? And I think we can spoke about in terms of how easy or how difficult it is for the developer to understand the flow.
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't seen any major friction points for developers. As long as you ease their signing process and release them from any kind of key management, right? I understand from a developer perspective, the current signing technologies are and look complex, but we are in a better place in terms of security knowledge for the supply chain security that we have been the last years, right? Also, kind of tooling is evolving in a way to simplify things. So, say now we have the GitHub Actions, which is kind of removing some of the complexity, right? Regarding the education in terms of security and supply chains, with examples like Log4j or SolarWinds, many developers understood the implications of signing the software. And if you now ask me about enterprise, I have a certain friction points too. Some of them are reluctant to have entries on public transparency logs or public instance, in this case, probably record, where the email of the employees or details about the projects appear. However, I think there are solutions for those, such as having private Sigstore instances or other kind of new approaches or improvements that might probably remove the adding this kind of information and probably adding some certain proof of that information.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we can actually back to the one more point of the circle. We talk about container image signing, but we can spoke about security and compliance. How does container signing contribute to your overall security posture?
Mhm. Well, so I think transparency and trust play a key role here. I won't, for instance, today I won't install or pull any container images on my system that hasn't been signed or by any trust authority. So I'm in this case I'm careful when I deploy container images from open source projects on my systems. I always verify the signatures, identity of the images, and check whether the project follows certain security guidelines, among other things. Right. Obviously, I am also incorporating these kind of habits on my developer habits, right? Like signing, kind of producing an SBOM, maybe attestations. Some of them might be optional in certain ways, but yeah, as a good citizen, I try to follow all these security guidelines in order to then be able to consume open source projects or open source artifacts.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And we have Batu with us on the chat. Thank you, Batu, for joining us. Always glad to see you in the YouTube chat as well. He's one of the Six Store evangelists in 2022 and has done wonderful contribution for this Six Store project as well. Thanks to see you, my friend. So now I think one thing I spoke about, we spoke about security and compliance. I think I added this question because Six Store has Kubernetes controllers in Sig stores or some sort of controller. And Sig store is actually find itself being in an ecosystem that easier to work with other tooling that already exist in the market, already exist like the policy and enforcement, those works together to solve our security posture. Like if you use Kyverno policies today, then you can add policies that basically check if your container are signed to being deployed in the production by using the cosign technology under the hood. So those actually work together under the hood as well. Do you think OpenPubkey in near future can integrate with those existing tooling, or is it a different learning curve? All that.
Um, well, again, it's a good question. Yeah, I think obviously you can integrate these. In fact, I think OpenPubkey creators think that Sigstore can integrate OpenPubkey. I don't know the opposite, um, but yeah, obviously you can kind of verify that the signing process follows certain steps. I also try myself if I can sign images with cosign and OpenPubkey also for experimental purposes. So I'm pretty sure, yeah, you can have policy enforcement to validate either one way of signing of another, as long as they follow OCI specifications, right? Like you can trust how the signatures where are they placed and how I can link them. That's one of the important things regarding containing images. In this case, you mentioned Kyberno. There's also Sigstore Policy Controller, which is
Yes.
another tool.
Yes, absolutely. And now I think another question we can ask here is, by integrating CI/CD, have you observed any impact on the build and deployment times due to container signing process?
Yeah, so this is one of the main topics I believe when you are kind of in adding webhooks to your deployment on Kubernetes, right? Um, yeah, so I will focus on the two main technologies I know and I have used in the past, used today, Kyberno and Policy Controller. In this case, it's a Policy Controller, and yeah. So in common workflows, they don't really add uh, a big impact in terms of performance or response time, right? Obviously, there are ways to cache all these kind of checks and verifications to make these almost transparent, but has any user, for instance, of Kubernetes, you will understand any webhook you add to the deployment or creation of resources will obviously add additional penalties, right, to the response time of the API. So yeah, there are ways to tame this, but I don't think is kind of has a big problem. Has my think when people hear about these two tools or webhooks in Kubernetes.
Yes, absolutely. I think during the conversation, you talk about the Kubernetes policy
Mhm.
controller. And if we
Yeah.
go to the Sigstore docs, we see some similar in the Sigstore doc as well. Can you elaborate what those are? Is it somewhat similar to the Kyverno and open policy agent policies, or it is a different one?
Well, so this policy that is kind of a sector policy custom resource has been designed with the community, and Kyberno has been present during that design of this kind of resource. So it's a kind of a sector policy custom resource, right? And has been defined with the community, but let's say that Sigstore have this custom resource while Kyberno is still using their own resources with similar structure. If you kind of think about, let's say, Kyberno policy definition, there are some similarities with chess-based because of the community. In that case, Kyberno members, they join and we were all kind of getting into a feedback loop to create this resource.
Got it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think now transparency and auditing. I think one of the questions we can actually ask around transparency is, how do you ensure transparency and maintain an audit trail of all container image signatures?
Yeah, so Sigstore does this pretty well, right? Like we have record, as I mentioned, well, you can see on the picture, offers a public instance where anyone can monitor and detect any tampering on the signing artifacts, images, or binaries. This is especially important, in my opinion, for the open source community, which brings trust and transparency on the produced artifacts, right? If you now ask me about how, for instance, OpenPubkey does this, well, I think this part is a bit more obscure. If you read about the proposal and now the implementation, sometimes they require additional services, and that's what I mentioned before. You will need a transparency log. And again, I think this contradicts the initial simplification of the whole picture.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is one of the killer feature of the Six Store as well. Like when you're signing the images, you have to do the audit trail, who does what, and every time you actually do some kind of editing or tampering, that the hashing change. It is very easy to understand where in the supply chain security posture things are actually contradicting, and then you use those policies to enforce those hashing, like that thing change and that is not in the original state, so let's block that policy, block that containers out of it. So if you remove that core part, then you need to do these kind of things, but you have another way of doing it, and I think that become a challenging as well. So complexity, as we mentioned earlier, is necessary in them, is in this some sort of the cases is there as well. So I think the final topic we can actually discuss right now, are there any specific areas of improvement or additional features you would like to see in container signing solution that exists today?
Mhm. Yes, yes, of course, there are a couple of things. I think one of the claims of OpenPubkey to appear, and at least what I am aware of reading the literature, as the uses of proof of identity instead of just the identity information. For instance, today you have the certificate authorities that kind of using the ID token in Sigstore create a certificate, right? The idea is to kind of avoid trust in certificate authorities because they can be malicious and someone can impersonate the identities, right? So I think in that case, I know the OpenPubkey implementation use something that they have called like JQ signatures, which is basically to remove any presence of any signature, either from the IDC provider signature, or in this case, if we kind of apply this to Sigstore, we remove the presence of any signature and simply add a proof of that, right? There is a couple of links that they can share, or articles they can share where they explain more about what is that. But this is kind of a simplification of what we have.
Yes, and final question before I let you off. So what future trends or innovation in container security and signing are you keeping an eye on?
Mhm. I have been obviously lately reading about OpenPubkey and also serial knowledge proofs, right? There are a couple of research papers. I often kind of focus on new things and new approaches by following research papers about this topic. And yeah, I also keep an eye on OpenPubkey evolution, obviously, because I want to be aware of all the different kind of services that they are adding and changes. And yeah, that's basically where I'm keeping an eye these days.
Absolutely. And the final question is, what is the newest thing that make you excited that hasn't been in the signing or security space in 2022, but that is actually comes out in 2023 and you are most excited about it?
Was it, that's complicated. That's complicated as well. I will generally try to see a bit more adoption, actually, to see kind of um, release the developers of the complexity, right? And kind of see all these kind of security guidelines that most of the open source projects are proposing, kind of a bit transparent for them. Also, I would like to see the increase of the knowledge of the community in general, which I have seen. Actually, I have been working in this field for a couple of years, so I have seen the evolution, and it's spectacular. But I think there's still a lot of unknowns. The complexity, if people understand about security, attackers are evolving all the time and learning the infrastructure and trying to hack in a different ways. Um, these kind of, let's say, infrastructures. So I think it has to be sometimes present in order to kind of bring more security and cover the technologies from possible attacks, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's our actually much needed item to be actually much needed item to taken care for in the near future as well. But I think really enjoyed the conversation. So final question: you'll work in the chain guard, and chain guard is one being a cornerstone when it's come to helping you protect against the supply chain attacks. And they have done a wonderful job, and they have going in a very rapid pace for just I think 3 years in the market, and they build out some tremendous tooling for enterprising to actually secure this supply chain security posture. So what's new in for the chain guard in 2024 that in the horizon that you wanted us to keep an eye out?
Well, I think we have work, or we are having a lot of work on the Chainguard images, right? I think that there is a lot of work on kind of it's always public on how we help to reduce the vulnerability chunk of work that everyone has to deal with it. And also, well, other products about Enforce, where we kind of provide a product that helps you to manage all this on running platforms. So yeah, I think you should keep an eye on Chainguard in order to get all the news goodies that we will bring this year. But yeah, looking
Yes,
forward also to share with everyone.
absolutely, 100%. And just a very final question. I think we're actually approaching to closing the episode. So, which sector you have seen adopted Sigstore compared to the other? Which sector is most actually interesting in adopting Sigstore? Is there any number, any statistic we have?
Yeah, I mean, sector that's very complex. I mean, I don't have probably that data, but I'm pretty sure I'll let you know that there is many open source projects that they are adopting. Well, there's Kubernetes. In the release pipeline, they are following most of the security guidelines, not only Sigstore signing, but also kind of others that I mentioned, like Salsa and additional guidelines, right? So I think in this case, open source community is also benefits a lot. So I will
Yes.
just think about this sector.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And yes, as Hector mentioned, the Kubernetes is images and all the things Kubernetes is signing by using the cosign technology, and is not just in one space, is in everywhere. It's becoming a standard. The way the cosign is signing the images under the tooling we have in Sigstore, like a part of the Racker and Full CO, and that is becoming a standard right now. And the community is going forward is a rapid adoption of these Sigstore tooling, and I've seen more and more growth for this year as well. Like we have seen 1 year in GA, and more use cases actually came up, and more advancement happening in this space as well. So I really like the way you actually answer all of the questions here. But looking forward to the more question in the YouTube description, YouTube chat and comments, because we wanted to learn from you. What are the different various way, or which are the signing technology are you using to today? Is it a notary? Is it a cosign? Or is it an open pub key? Give us your opinion. And if you have any question, feel free to chat Hector on X, Twitter, or actually you can go to the resources or the sigstore.dev and find the security posture and overall architecture, how things work. Then we actually talk about Kubernetes policy controller. That's how Sigstore works very well with the ecosystem of tooling under policy and compliance like Kyverno and open policy agents. Also, if you want to take a deeper dive in how the OpenPub key architecture is different from Sigstore, so Dan Lawrence is actually write a wonderful blog about it. It's a very detail-oriented blog that you can go through it and learn about what the different key features we have. Then there's the OpenSSF. I think the Sigstore community is becoming a more tuned toward the OpenSSF foundation. That's where you can find more and blog and ecosystem of tooling. So you can read about how to simplify code signing for open source ecosystem. And if you want to stay notified for the open Sigstore ecosystem, uh, look at this handle or the X or Twitter for, and make sure you actually notified when the new announcement came up. And this is the website, I believe, for the OpenPub key. you can actually take a drill down to see what they're actually doing in this space. And here's a open official announcement of the last month. They actually write about what the intention and motivation behind this project. And I think this Docker is now signing their official images using OpenPubkey. But we're looking forward to see how other community are looking forward to it. And there's another comparative tool on OpenPubkey or Sigstore. Which one to choose is also written by the Clapnix community. You can find out as well. And if you like the episode, tune into this channel and let us know what are the next topic you want to cover up in the future. And next up, we will be talking to Adrian Mount on cloud native security state of the report from 2023 in the next episode that's happening on Thursday, hour from now, around 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Pacific time. So with that, I will give. So have a. We spoke about so many things here. I just give you a very descriptive analysis of all that. Security. How important is security for you? Sigstore provide a higher level of security than PubKey. Ease of use. How easy do you need the solution to be used? PubKey is easier, but then Sigstore has some kind of advanced use cases that we really like about. We need in do you infrastructure requirement. Do you have the resources to support the requirement infrastructure? Sigstore required the certificate authority and transparency log, which can be complex and expensive to maintain, but it's been there for a very good reason. But OpenPubkey doesn't require any additional infrastructure. Community support, how important is community support for you? Sigstore has a larger ecosystem compared to the newborn baby OpenPubkey that is actually been in the ecosystem for I think over a month now. So Sigstore and OpenPubkey are both good container signing solution. The best solution for you will depend on your specific needs and requirements. With that, thank you very much once again, Hector, for a wonderful descriptive analysis of very complex but looks very simpler to understand when you speak about those concepts as well. Feel free to ping us if you have any more question. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye, everyone.